Marco Vitali had built his empire on certainty. Every decision, every handshake, every whispered order in the back rooms of Manhattan carried the weight of absolute conviction. He knew who his enemies were. He knew who his allies were. He knew the price of betrayal and the cost of mercy. But there was one thing Marco Vitali did not know, and that single blind spot would soon tear his world apart. It started with a phone call. Elena stood in the kitchen of their Upper East Side penthouse, her back to him, her voice low and hurried. She ended the conversation the moment she sensed his presence, sliding her phone into the pocket of her silk robe with the practiced ease of someone hiding something. "Who was that?" Marco asked, his voice calm but edged with something sharper beneath. "My sister," Elena replied, not quite meeting his eyes. She needed advice about the renovations. Marco nodded slowly, watching her move toward the coffee machine, her hands steady, but her shoulders tight. He had spent 20 years reading people, decoding lies hidden in the spaces between words. And in that moment, watching his wife of 7 years avoid his gaze, Marco felt something cold settle into his chest. Doubt. It was a sensation he had not experienced in a very long time. Eleanor had been his anchor, the woman who walked into his world knowing exactly what he was and choosing to stay anyway. She had never flinched at the late-night meetings, the men with hard faces who came and went through, their home, the whispered phone calls that ended in silence. She had given him 2 children, built a home that felt like sanctuary, loved him with a ferocity that matched his own. But lately, something had shifted. The first sign came 3 weeks ago. Eleanor began leaving the penthouse at odd hours, always with a reasonable explanation. A charity meeting, a visit to her mother in Queens, a shopping trip that stretched into the evening. Marco had not questioned her. Trust, after all, was the foundation of everything they had built together. But then the explanations started to unravel. Her mother mentioned that Eleanor had not visited in over a month. The charity board confirmed she had missed the last 2 meetings. And when Marco checked the family credit card statements, he found charges at a hospital in Brooklyn, a hospital Elena had never mentioned. Now, standing in their kitchen, as morning light spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, Marco watched his wife pour coffee. She would not drink and smile at him with lips that hid secrets. "I have meetings downtown today," he said, testing her. "I will be late." Elena nodded, relief flickering across her features so quickly that anyone else would have missed it. But Marco was not anyone else. "I might run some errands myself," she said lightly. "I will see you tonight." He kissed her forehead before leaving, breathing in the familiar scent of jasmine and something else, antiseptic, sharp and clinical, clinging to her, hair like an accusation. Marco did not go to his meetings. Instead, he sat in the back of his black Escalade, parked across the street from their building, watching. Dominic, his most trusted lieutenant, sat beside him in silence, knowing better than to ask questions. 20 minutes later, Elena emerged. She wore simple clothes, jeans, a cream sweater, flat shoes, no jewelry except her wedding ring. She hailed a taxi rather than calling their driver, and Marco felt the cold in his chest spread further. "Follow her," he said quietly. The taxi headed east, then south, crossing the Williamsburg Bridge into Brooklyn. Elena stared out the window the entire ride, her face carrying an expression Marco had never seen before, something between determination and grief, as if she were traveling toward a destination she both dreaded and needed. The hospital appeared through the morning haze, a sprawling complex of brick and glass that bore the name of a Saint Marco could not remember. Elena paid the driver and walked through the main entrance without hesitation, navigating the corridors with the familiarity of someone who had made this journey many times before. Marco waited. Minutes became an hour. The doubt in his chest hardened into something sharper, more dangerous. In his world, secrecy meant betrayal, hidden meetings meant deals made in darkness, and a wife who disappeared into hospitals without explanation meant only one thing. She was either dying or deceiving him. Neither possibility was acceptable. When Elena finally emerged, her eyes were red. She paused outside the entrance, pressing her hand against her chest, as if holding herself together through sheer will. Then she straightened, composed her features into the mask she wore for the world, and walked toward the subway station. Marco did not follow her. Instead, he stepped out of the vehicle, adjusted his coat, and walked into the hospital with the measured stride of a man who owned everything he surveyed. The reception area was bright and sterile, filled with the particular silence of places where hope and despair coexisted. Marco approached the desk, offered a smile that did not reach his eyes, and spoke in the voice that had negotiated ceasefires and commanded loyalty from men who feared nothing. "I'm looking for information about a visitor. My wife was just here, Elena Vitali." The receptionist glanced up, recognition flickering in her eyes at the name. "I am sorry, sir, but I cannot disclose patient information or visiting records." Marco leaned closer, his presence filling the space between them. "I am not asking for patient information. I am asking what floor my wife has been visiting. Surely that is not a secret." Something in his tone made the woman's hands tremble slightly as she typed. "Mrs. Vitali has been visiting the pediatric oncology wing, 3rd floor, room 318. Pediatric oncology. The word struck Marco like a physical blow. Children. Illness. The intersection of those two realities created a darkness he had spent his entire adult life avoiding. His own children, Sophia, age 6, and Marcus, age 4, were healthy, vibrant, filling their home with noise and chaos that Marco secretly cherished more than any empire. So why was Elena visiting a sick child? He took the elevator to the 3rd floor, each ascending number bringing him closer to an answer he was no longer certain he wanted. The pediatric wing was different from the rest of the hospital. Brighter colors on the walls, artwork made by small hands, the distant sound of a television playing cartoons. But beneath the manufactured cheerfulness lay the weight of something far heavier. Room 318 was at the end of the corridor. The door was partially open, and through the gap Marco could see a bed surrounded by monitors and tubes, their rhythmic beeping a mechanical heartbeat counting moments that might be running out. He pushed the door open. The boy in the bed could not have been older than 8. His hair was gone, his skin pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, but his eyes, those eyes were dark and sharp and familiar in a way that made Marco's breath catch in his throat. Because those were his eyes, his father's eyes. The eyes that had stared back at him from mirrors for 43 years. On the bedside table sat a photograph in a silver frame. A woman with auburn hair held an infant against her chest, her smile bright with the particular joy of new motherhood. Marco recognized her instantly, though he had not seen her face in nearly a decade. Gabriella. The memory crashed over him like a wave. Gabriella, the woman he had loved before Elena, before the empire, before he became the man the world knew as Marco Vitali. They had been young and reckless, burning through a summer that felt like it would never end. Then she had disappeared without explanation, leaving nothing but a note that said she could not live in his world. Marco had searched for her. For months, he had turned the city inside out looking for the woman who had vanished like smoke. Eventually, he had accepted her absence as another casualty of the life he had chosen, buried the pain beneath layers of ambition and necessity, and moved forward. He had never known she was pregnant. The boy stirred, his eyes fluttering open to find a stranger standing in his doorway. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the dying child and the man who had never known he existed. "Ah, you a doctor?" the boy asked, his voice thin but curious. Marco could not speak. His throat had closed around words he did not have, emotions he had trained himself never to feel. He was a man who controlled entire neighborhoods, who made decisions that shaped the lives of thousands, who had looked into the eyes of enemies and felt nothing but cold calculation. But standing in this hospital room, facing a son he had never met, Marco Vitali felt something he had not experienced since childhood: fear. "No," he finally managed. "I am not a doctor." The boy studied him with unsettling intensity. "You look like the picture my mom had, the one she never showed anyone." "Your mother." Marco's voice cracked on the word. Gabriella. Where is she? Something shifted in the boy's expression, a shadow passing over features too young to carry such weight. She passed away 6 months ago. The same thing I have. She told me it runs in families sometimes. The room seemed to tilt. Marco gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white against the wood. Gabriella was gone. The woman who had haunted his memories for years, the first person he had ever truly loved, had died without him ever knowing. And she had left behind a son. His son. "What is your name?" Marco asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Luca." The boy attempted a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Luca Moretti. That was my mom's last name. She said my father was someone important, but she never told me who. She said it was safer that way." Safer. The word echoed through Marco's mind. Gabriella had kept this secret to protect their child from the darkness of his world. She had raised Luca alone, fought her illness alone, and died alone, all because she had loved Marco enough to shield their son from the life he led. "The lady who visits me," Luca continued, his small hand gesturing toward the chair where Eleanor must have sat countless times. "She is nice. She reads to me and brings me food from this Italian place. That makes the best cannoli. She told me not to tell anyone about her visits because it is a surprise for someone. Are you the surprise?" Marco could not answer. His mind was racing through implications, connections, the intricate web of cause and effect that had led to this moment. Eleanor had discovered his son. She had been caring for him in secret, visiting this hospital, while Marco grew suspicious and cold. She had not betrayed him. She had been trying to give him a gift, the son he never knew, the family he thought he had lost. And Marco, in his paranoia and pride, had followed her like she was an enemy. "Stay here," he told Luca, his voice rough with emotion he could barely contain. "I need to make a phone call." He stepped into the corridor and pulled out his phone, his hands trembling for the first time in decades. Elena answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone prepared for confrontation. "Marco, is everything all right?" He closed his eyes, leaning against the wall as the weight of revelation pressed down on him. "Elena, I know." Silence stretched across the connection. Then, softly, she asked, "How?" "I followed you." The confession tasted like ash in his mouth. "I thought—" "It does not matter what I thought. I was wrong." Eleanor exhaled slowly. "I was going to tell you. I was trying to find the right moment. Luca is... he is yours, Marco. I found out by accident, through a charity connection at the hospital. His mother listed you as next of kin in her final documents, but she marked the information confidential. Someone made a mistake and contacted our family lawyer. Why did you not tell me immediately? Because I needed to understand first. I needed to know who he was, what he needed, whether bringing this into your life would help him or hurt everyone. I have been with him for 3 months, Marco. I have watched him face treatments that would break grown men. And I have seen his eyes, your eyes, searching for something he cannot name. Marco pressed his palm against his forehead, overwhelmed by the complexity of what his wife had done. She had not hidden this out of malice or deception. She had hidden it out of love, taking time to prepare the ground before planting seeds that would grow into something neither of them fully understood. "He is very sick," Elena continued, her voice catching. "The doctors are not optimistic, but he is also strong, Marco. Stronger than anyone I have ever met. He reminds me of you. I want to know him." The words came from somewhere deep and primal. "I want to help him. Then come home. We will figure this out together. We will bring him into our family properly, give him everything we can for however long we have." Marco looked back toward room 318, where a boy who shared his eyes was waiting for answers that might never come. The empire he had built, the power he wielded, the fear he commanded, none of it meant anything compared to the fragile life contained within those hospital walls. "Eleanor," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years spent building walls instead of bridges. Thank you for finding him, for caring for him when I did not even know he existed. I do not deserve you. No, she agreed, a hint of warmth breaking through her composure. But you have me anyway. Now come home, Marco. We have a family to rebuild. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. If stories like this move something deep inside you, if you want to be part of a community that believes in second chances and the power of love, subscribe now and join us on this journey. The drive back to Manhattan felt like crossing between two worlds. Marco sat in the back of the Escalade, watching Brooklyn's industrial landscape give way to the gleaming towers of the city, but his mind remained anchored in room 318, with a boy whose existence had rewritten everything he thought he understood about his life. Dominic glanced at him through the rearview mirror but said nothing. They had worked together for 15 years, long enough for silence to communicate more than words ever could. Elena was waiting when Marco arrived at the penthouse. She stood by the windows overlooking Central Park, her silhouette framed by autumn light that turned her dark hair copper at the edges. She did not turn when he entered, but her shoulders shifted slightly, acknowledging his presence. "The children are with my mother," she said, softly. "I thought we should talk alone first." Marco crossed the room and stood beside her, their reflections ghost-like in the glass. Below them, the park stretched green and gold, filled with people living ordinary lives that seemed impossibly distant from this moment. "Tell me everything," he said. Elena nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. 3 months ago, our family lawyer received a document from Gabriella Moretti's estate. It was a letter, written before she died, asking that you be notified of Luca's existence only if her illness proved terminal. She wanted to protect him as long as she could, but she also wanted him to know his father eventually. Why contact our lawyer? Gabriella never forgot you, Marco. She kept track of your life from a distance, knew when you married, when our children were born. The lawyer she used was a former associate of ours, someone she trusted to handle things discreetly. Marco absorbed this information, each revelation adding new layers to a past he thought he understood. Gabriella had watched him from afar, had known about Elena and Sophia and Marcus, had chosen silence over disruption. "When I received the documents," Elena continued, "I did not know what to do. Telling you immediately seemed cruel, introducing you to a son only to watch him face treatments that might not work. So I went to the hospital myself. I wanted to see him, to understand who he was before making any decisions." "And what did you find?" Eleanor finally turned to face him, her eyes bright with emotion she rarely allowed herself to show. "I found a remarkable child, Marco. Intelligent, brave, kind, despite everything he has endured. He talks about his mother constantly, keeps her photograph beside his bed, tells stories about the life they had together. And he asks questions about the father he never knew, questions I could not answer truthfully. Does he know? About me, about who I am?" "No. I told him I was a family friend of his mother's, someone who wanted to help. He accepted that because he had no reason not to. But he is perceptive, Marco. He knows there is more to the story." Marco walked to the leather couch and sat heavily, the weight of the day pressing down on him. His empire had been built on control, on anticipating every variable and eliminating uncertainty. But this, a dying child, a secret past, a wife who had navigated impossible waters without his knowledge, this was beyond anything he could have prepared for. "What are his chances?" he asked, dreading the answer. Elena sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. "The leukemia is aggressive. He has been through 2 rounds of intensive treatment already. The doctors say there is one more option, an experimental therapy that has shown promise in similar cases. But it is expensive and the hospital was struggling to find funding. That is why you were visiting. You have been paying for his treatment." "Yes, I use discretionary funds from my charitable accounts. I wanted to give him every chance before telling you, before complicating his care with the questions that would inevitably follow." Marco looked at his wife with new eyes. For 7 years, he had known her as partner, mother, the steady presence that anchored his chaotic world. But he had never seen this side of her, the woman who would carry an impossible burden alone simply to protect the people she loved. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. I thought the worst. I let doubt poison everything." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "You were right to be suspicious. I was keeping secrets, disappearing without real explanations. In your world, that usually means betrayal. But Marco, this is not your world. This is something different, something that exists outside the rules we have always lived by. What do we do now?" "We tell the children. We bring Luca home when he is stable enough to leave the hospital. We become a family. All of us, together." Marco considered. The implications. Introducing a dying child into their household would change everything. Sophia and Marcus would have questions he did not know how to answer. His organization would perceive any sign of vulnerability as an opportunity. And Luca himself. How would an 8-year-old who had lost everything respond to discovering that his father was a man who operated in shadows? "There will be complications," he said carefully. "People who would use this against us." "Let them try." Elena's voice carried an edge that reminded Marco why he had married her. "Luca is your son. That makes him family. And we protect family, Marco. That is what we do." She was right, of course. The code that governed his empire was built on exactly that principle, the fierce loyalty to blood and bond that separated his organization from common criminals. If he could not extend that same protection to his own child, everything he believed meant nothing. "I want to bring specialists in," Marco decided. "The best doctors in the country, whatever they cost. If this experimental treatment is his best chance, I want to make sure it succeeds." Elena nodded. "I already have a list. Oncologists from Johns Hopkins, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Boston Children's Hospital. We can start making calls tomorrow." "Tonight," Marco corrected. "We start tonight. I have wasted enough time already." They worked through the evening, transforming the penthouse into a command center focused on a battle far more important than any territorial dispute. Marco called in favors from hospital administrators, pharmaceutical executives, research scientists, anyone who might help improve Luca's chances. Elena coordinated logistics, scheduling consultations, arranging travel for specialists who agreed to review the case. By midnight, they had assembled a team of 7 doctors willing to collaborate on Luca's treatment. The experimental therapy would begin within the week, supported by resources that most families could never access. Money, Marco realized, could not buy everything, but it could buy time, and time was all that mattered now. "We should visit him tomorrow," Elena said as they finally stopped to rest. "Together. You should introduce yourself properly." Marco felt the familiar fear return, the terrifying vulnerability of caring for someone whose fate remained uncertain. "What do I say to him? I have missed 8 years of his life. I did not even know he existed." "You say the truth, that you are his father, that you did not know about him until now, that you want to know him for whatever time you have together. Children understand more than we give them credit for. Luca has faced his mother's illness, watched her fade, held her hand while she passed. He knows that love is not measured in years." Marco looked at his wife, struck once again by her capacity for wisdom in moments that demanded it. "How did you become so brave?" Elena smiled, weariness and warmth mingling in her expression. "I married you, Marco. That required bravery from the very beginning." The hospital room felt different the next morning, transformed by the weight of what Marco now knew. Luca was sitting up in bed when they arrived, a tablet propped against his knees, his face illuminated by the glow of whatever game he was playing. He looked up at their entrance, recognition flickering in his dark eyes. "You came back," he said to Marco, "and you brought the nice lady." "My name is Elena," she said gently, settling into her usual chair beside the bed. "And this is Marco. There is something we need to tell you, Luca. Something important about who he is." Luca set the tablet aside, his expression sharpening with the particular intelligence that illness sometimes gifted to children who had faced too much too young. "I already know," he said quietly. "You are my father." Marco's breath caught. How? I am not stupid. You have my eyes, the same ones my mom had in that picture she never showed anyone. And Elena kept asking me questions about my mother, about what she told me about my father. I figured it out weeks ago. The boy spoke with a calmness that belied his age, as if death had taught him to waste nothing, not time, not words, not the energy required for pretense. Why did you not say anything? Elena asked. Because I wanted to see what you would do. My mom always said that people show who they really are through actions, not words. Elena kept coming back, bringing books and food, and just sitting with me. That told me more than any explanation ever could. Marco moved closer, his steps hesitant in a way they never were in boardrooms or back alleys. I want you to know that I did not abandon you. I did not know, Luca. Your mother never told me. I know. She wrote me a letter before she died. She explained everything, why she left, why she kept me secret, why she thought it was safer for me to grow up without knowing you. She said you lived in a dangerous world and she wanted to protect me from it. She was right. Marco sat on the edge of the bed, close enough to see the way exhaustion had carved hollows beneath his son's eyes. My world is dangerous, but it is also my world, which means I have the power to protect you within it. And I will, Luca, whatever it takes. The boy studied him for a long moment, weighing words against the father he had only ever known through photographs and whispered stories. Then, slowly, he extended his small hand toward Marco. Okay, Luca said simply, I believe you. Marco took his son's hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath paper-thin skin, the warmth that persisted despite everything working to extinguish it. In that moment, holding the hand of a child he had not known existed, Marco Vitali made a promise that superseded every oath he had ever sworn. This boy would live. Whatever the cost, whatever the sacrifice, whatever battles needed to be fought, Luca would survive. The experimental treatment began. 3 days later, the hospital transformed Luca's room into a sterile cocoon, lined with machines that hummed and beeped and measured every fluctuation in his fragile body. Marco and Elena took turns maintaining vigil, their lives reshaping themselves around the rhythm of IV drips and medication schedules. Sophia and Marcus came to visit on the 4th day, their small faces pressed against the glass observation window as Elena explained what was happening inside. That is your brother, she told them gently. His name is Luca and he is very sick. We are going to help take care of him. Why does he not have hair? Sophia asked, her 6-year-old logic cutting through adult euphemisms. The medicine that is helping him get better also makes his hair fall out, but it will grow back when he is healthy again. Marcus, only 4, pressed his palm against the glass. Can I give him my dinosaur? T-Rex makes me feel better when I am sick. Elena's eyes glistened as she knelt beside her son. That is the kindest thing I have ever heard. We will ask the doctors if that is okay. The children's acceptance came more easily than Marco had anticipated. They did not question Luca's sudden appearance in their lives, did not demand explanations for the complexity of adult decisions. They simply accepted him as brother, as family, as someone who belonged. Within 2 weeks, Luca's condition stabilized enough for short visits. Sophia would sit beside his bed and read stories from her favorite books, her voice patient and careful over unfamiliar words. Marcus contributed his dinosaur collection, arranging plastic creatures across Luca's blanket in elaborate battle formations that made the sick boy smile. And Marco learned to be a father in ways he had never been before. His relationship with Sophia and Marcus had always been shaped by his work, by late nights and early mornings, and the constant demands of an empire that never slept. He loved them fiercely, would destroy anyone who threatened them, but the daily intimacy of fatherhood had often fallen to Elena, while he managed crises that seemed to never end. With Luca, everything was different. There were no pressing meetings that could not wait, no emergencies more urgent than the battle being fought in room 318. For the first time in his adult life, Marco Vitali was fully present, sitting beside his son for hours at a time, learning the contours of a childhood he had missed. Luca told him stories about Gabriella, about the small apartment they had shared in a quiet corner of Brooklyn, about her job as a translator and the languages she had taught him to love. He described birthdays with homemade cakes, summer days spent in Prospect Park, the sound of his mother's laughter filling spaces that now stood empty. "She talked about you sometimes," Luca said during one of their late-night conversations, the hospital quiet around them. "Not by name, but I knew she was thinking about someone from before. She would get this look on her face, like she was remembering something both happy and sad at the same time." "I loved her," Marco admitted, the words coming easier than he expected. "She was the first person who ever made me want to be different than I was." "Why did she leave?" Marco considered how to answer honestly without burdening a child with complexities he should never have to understand. "She was afraid. Not of me, but of the life I was building. She wanted to protect you from choices I had already made." Luca absorbed this, his dark eyes thoughtful. "Do you wish she had stayed?" "I wish I had known about you. I wish I could have been there for the years I missed, but I cannot change the past, Luca. I can only try to be present now." The boy nodded slowly. "My mom used to say that regretting yesterday steals joy from today. She said the only direction worth moving is forward." Marco smiled, hearing Gabriella's wisdom echoed in her son's words. "She was a smart woman." "The smartest," Luca's voice caught slightly. "I miss her every day." "I know." Marco reached out, his large hand covering his son's smaller one. "But missing someone does not mean they are gone. They live on in the people who loved them, in the lessons they taught, in the memories they left behind. Gabriella lives in you, Luca. Every time you quote her wisdom, every time you show the courage she gave you, she is right here." Tears tracked down Luca's pale cheeks, but he did not look away. "Will you tell me more about her? The parts from before I existed. I only know her as my mom, but she must have been other things too." So Marco began to share memories he had buried for nearly a decade. He told Luca about meeting Gabriella at an art gallery in Soho, about her laugh that could fill entire rooms, about the way she saw beauty in things others overlooked. He described summer nights on rooftops, philosophical debates that stretched until dawn, the particular way she had of making him feel, like the person he wanted to be rather than the person circumstances had forced him to become. "She sounds wonderful," Luca whispered when Marco finally fell silent. "She was, and she raised someone wonderful too." Their bond deepened through those hospital nights, father and son building a connection that transcended the years they had lost. Elena watched from the doorway sometimes, her heart full of emotions too complex to name. She had given her husband a gift she knew he needed without knowing she was giving it. Now she watched that gift transform him into someone she had always believed he could be. The treatment showed its first signs of progress at the end of the 3rd week. The doctors called it a modest improvement, cautioning against premature optimism. But Marco saw hope flickering in their careful words. Luca's numbers were stabilizing. The aggressive cells were responding to therapy. The battle was far from won, but they were no longer losing ground. To celebrate, Elena brought cannoli from the Italian bakery Luca loved, the same bakery she had been visiting for months, carrying small comforts to a boy who had no one else to comfort him. "I remember the first time you brought these," Luca said between bites. "I thought you were maybe an angel. My mom used to tell me angels sometimes looked like regular people." Elena smiled, brushing crumbs from his blanket. "Not an angel, just someone who recognized a soul worth knowing. Will you still visit when I get better, when I go home? Luca." Elena took his hand, her voice firm with conviction. "When you leave this hospital, you are coming home with us. You are part of our family now, officially and forever. You will never have to worry about being alone again." The boy's eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring across his features. "Really? I can live with you, with Sophia and Marcus and Marco? Really? We are already working on making it legal. Your mother's documents named Marco as your father, and we have submitted paperwork to formalize everything. Soon you will officially be a Vitali." Luca looked toward the window, where late afternoon sun painted the Brooklyn skyline in shades of gold and amber. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I used to dream about this, having a family again, people who wanted me. I thought it was impossible, that I would grow up alone, that the sickness would win before anything good could happen. But now—" He trailed off, unable to finish. Eleanor gathered him into a gentle embrace, mindful of tubes and wires, holding the child who had become her son in every way that mattered. "Now you have us," she whispered, "and we are never letting go. If this moment touched your heart, pause right now and leave a comment saying, 'Family is not just about sharing the same name, it is about choosing to show up every single day.' Let me know that these stories matter to you as much as they matter to me." Autumn deepened into the early edges of winter, and Luca grew stronger. The experimental therapy exceeded every cautious prediction, driving his illness into retreat with a ferocity that matched the love surrounding him. By early November, the doctors began discussing discharge, the possibility of continuing treatment at home, of trading hospital walls for the warmth of actual family. Marco threw himself into preparation. The penthouse transformed as contractors arrived to modify the guest suite into a proper bedroom for Luca, complete with medical equipment for ongoing care and enough space for the toys and books that had begun accumulating in his hospital room. A team of private nurses was hired. Specialists were retained on indefinite consultation. No expense was questioned, no precaution overlooked. "You are terrifying the staff," Elena observed one evening, as Marco reviewed contractor schedules for the third time. "They think you are preparing for royalty. I am preparing for my son." Marco did not look up. From his tablet, every detail matters. She crossed the room and gently took the device from his hands. "Luca does not need perfection, Marco. He needs presence. He needs to feel wanted, not managed. There is a difference." Marco met her eyes, seeing the wisdom there that had guided their family through so many storms. "I do not know how to do this, Elena. I know how to negotiate treaties and manage crises and protect territory, but raising a child who has been through what Luca has been through, I do not have a manual for that." "Neither do I." She sat beside him on the couch. "Neither does any parent. We figure it out as we go, making mistakes and correcting them, loving imperfectly but completely. That is all any child truly needs. What if I fail him? What if I make promises I cannot keep?" Eleanor took his hand, her grip firm and certain. "You will fail him sometimes. All parents do. But the measure of a father is not perfection. It is showing up despite the fear, trying, despite the uncertainty, loving despite the risk. You have already proven you can do that." Marco looked toward the window, where city lights glittered against the darkness like earthbound stars. His empire stretched across those lights, an invisible web of power and influence that had defined his identity for 2 decades. But somehow, in the span of a few months, that empire had begun to feel less important than the family waiting in a Brooklyn hospital room. "I want to change things," he said, quietly, the words surprising even himself. "Not everything, not immediately, but the worst parts, the operations that Elena would never want our children to know about. I want to transition toward legitimacy, even if it takes years." Elena studied him carefully. "What brought this on?" "Luca. The way he looks at me, like I am capable of being the father he deserves. I cannot be that person while running the kind of organization I have built. The contradictions will destroy everything, eventually. That is a significant decision, Marco. Your associates will not accept change easily. They will accept what I tell them to accept. That has always been the arrangement." His voice carried the steel that had built his empire, now redirected toward a purpose that finally felt worthy of the cost. "I started this life because I thought power was the only protection that mattered, but power without purpose is just violence in a better suit. I want something different for our children, all 3 of them." Elena leaned against his shoulder, her warmth grounding him in the reality of the moment. Then we will work toward that together. Slowly, carefully, without risking the safety we have built. But Marco, the man you want to become is not so different from the man you already are. You just need to let more people see him. The conversation marked a turning point that extended far beyond the penthouse walls. Over the following weeks, Marco began the delicate process of restructuring his organization, delegating certain operations to lieutenants he trusted, while gradually withdrawing from activities that could no longer be justified. It was a dangerous transition, requiring careful management of relationships built on decades of mutual benefit and obligation. But Marco navigated those waters with the same precision that had established his reputation, transforming potential resistance into reluctant acceptance through a combination of generosity and unspoken threat. Luca came home on a Thursday in mid-November, carried into the penthouse by a father who refused to let anyone else perform that particular honor. Sophia and Marcus had decorated his room with handmade banners and drawings, their childish artwork transforming the space into something that felt genuinely welcoming. "This is mine?" Luca asked, his voice small with wonder as he took in the bookshelves and toys and the comfortable bed that awaited him. "All of this?" "All of this, Marco." "Confirmed. And anything else you want? You are home now, Luca." The adjustment was not without challenges. Luca's illness had left him fragile, requiring careful monitoring and strict medication schedules. There were setbacks and difficult days, moments when fear returned to darken the hope they had cultivated. But there were also breakthroughs. The first meal eaten with genuine appetite, the first night slept through without interruption, the first laugh that echoed through the penthouse like music long forgotten. Sophia took her role as older sister seriously, adopting Luca with a protective ferocity that rivaled her father's. She helped him with schoolwork, translated household routines he was still learning, defended him against the occasional thoughtless comment from children who did not understand why he looked different. Marcus, simpler in his approach, simply loved without condition. He crawled into Luca's bed for morning cartoons, shared his most precious dinosaurs without being asked, and announced to anyone who would listen that his brother was the bravest person he had ever met. "They are incredible," Luca told Marco one evening as they watched the younger children play in the living room. "I always wanted siblings, but I never thought I would actually have them." "They think you hung the moon," Marco replied. "Sophia told me yesterday that she wants to be a doctor when she grows up, specifically to help kids like you." Luca smiled, the expression still rare, enough to feel precious. "She would be good at it. She never treats me like I am fragile, but she also notices when I am tired before anyone else does. That is exactly what doctors should be able to do." "What about you? What do you want to be?" The boy considered the question seriously, his dark eyes thoughtful. "I do not know yet. For a long time I only thought about surviving. I did not plan for after because after seemed impossible. But now—" He gestured vaguely at the room around them, at the family gathered within its walls. "Now I have to actually figure out a future. It is kind of overwhelming." Marco understood that feeling more than he could express. His own future had shifted so dramatically since discovering Luca's existence that he sometimes felt like he was learning to walk again, each step uncertain but necessary. "You do not have to figure everything out at once," he said. "The point of having a future is that it takes time to unfold. You just have to keep moving forward." That sounds like something my mum would say. She was wise. I hope I can live up to the example she set. Luca leaned against Marco's shoulder, a gesture of casual intimacy that would have seemed impossible just months ago. "You already are, Dad. You already are." The word "Dad" landed like a benediction, healing wounds Marco had not known he carried. He wrapped an arm around his son, holding him close, savoring a moment that felt like everything he had never known to want. The new year arrived wrapped in snow and possibility. The penthouse glowed with warmth against the January cold, filled with the sounds of a family that had grown and changed in ways none of them could have predicted. Luca's health continued to improve, each medical appointment bringing news that reinforced the hope they had cultivated through months of uncertainty. But even in the midst of healing, shadows remained. Marco's transition toward legitimacy had not gone unnoticed by those who paid attention to such things. Former associates whispered concerns about weakness, about a leader distracted by family matters, about opportunities that might arise if the Vitali organization showed vulnerability. Marco navigated these concerns with calculated responses, but the tension remained, an undercurrent of risk that colored every decision. The challenge crystallized on a gray afternoon in late January, when an old rival named Victor Castellano requested a meeting. The invitation arrived through proper channels, framed as a discussion of mutual business interests, but Marco recognized it for what it truly was: an assessment, a test of whether the rumors about his changing priorities held truth. "You do not have to go," Eleanor said when he showed her the message. "Victor has been looking for leverage for years. This could be a trap. If it is a trap, refusing the meeting only makes me look afraid. That invites more danger, not less. Then let Dominic handle it. You do not need to expose yourself directly." Marco shook his head. "Victor specifically requested me. Sending a proxy would be an insult, and insults start conflicts that I would prefer to avoid. I will take precautions, but I need to handle this personally." Elena's expression carried the particular tension that appeared whenever his work encroached on their family life. "The children need you, Marco. Luca, especially. He has just started to feel safe, and if something happens to you—" "Nothing will happen to me." Marco cupped her face in his hands, meeting her eyes with steady certainty. "I have too much to live for now. Victor knows that, which means he also knows what I will do to protect it. This meeting is about establishing boundaries, reminding everyone involved that changing my priorities does not mean weakening my resolve." The meeting took place in a private room at an upscale restaurant in Midtown, neutral territory chosen for its public visibility and discreet atmosphere. Victor Castellano waited at a corner table, his silver hair immaculately groomed, his expensive suit cut to minimize the bulk of age and indulgence that had accumulated over the years. "Marco." He rose to offer a handshake that carried no genuine warmth. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. I know your time is valuable these days." Marco took the offered seat, his posture relaxed but alert. "Your message suggested mutual interests. I am curious what interests we might share." Victor smiled, the expression calculated to project affability while revealing nothing. "Direct as always, that is what I have always appreciated about you, Marco. No unnecessary games." "Games waste time. Say what you came to say." The older man leaned back, studying Marco with eyes that had seen decades of negotiation and conflict. "There are concerns circulating through certain circles, rumors that Marco Vitali is going soft, prioritizing domestic matters over business obligations, that the great empire you built is being quietly dismantled. And you are here to assess whether those rumors are true. I am here because we have known each other a long time, and I would rather understand your intentions directly than rely on second-hand speculation." Marco considered his response carefully. Victor Castellano was neither friend nor enemy, but rather a neighboring power whose interests occasionally aligned and occasionally conflicted with his own. Honesty would reveal vulnerability. Deflection would fuel suspicion. The path forward required something more nuanced. "I have made changes," Marco acknowledged. "My family has grown in unexpected ways, and that growth has clarified certain priorities. But changed priorities should not be confused with diminished capability. I remain fully committed to protecting what belongs to me, my territory, my organization, my people." "And the operations you have delegated? The responsibilities you have transferred to others?" "Efficiencies. A leader who micromanages every detail is not a leader. He is a bottleneck. I have chosen to trust capable people with tasks they can handle while focusing my attention on matters that require my direct involvement." Victor nodded slowly, absorbing this explanation. "That is a reasonable position, but it does raise questions about your long-term vision. Some wonder if Marco Vitali is preparing for retirement, clearing the way for succession that others might want to influence. The implication was clear. Enough. Rival organizations considering whether the Vitali Empire was entering a period of transition that could be exploited. Marco met Victor's gaze without flinching. Let me be clear. I have no intention of retiring, and any attempt to influence succession within my organization would be treated as a direct act of aggression. The changes I am implementing serve my family's future, but that future includes my continued leadership for many years to come. And if circumstances were to change? If, say, personal matters were to distract you at a critical moment? Marco's expression hardened. If anyone interprets my devotion to my family as a weakness to be exploited, they will discover how catastrophically wrong that interpretation is. I would suggest spreading that message through whatever circles expressed concern. It might save everyone considerable trouble. The warning landed as intended. Victor's calculated smile flickered briefly before reasserting itself. A fair point. I will. Pass along your perspective. Do that, and Victor, this is the last meeting we will have on this subject. My personal affairs are not topics for discussion with business associates, regardless of how long our acquaintance. If there are legitimate matters requiring coordination between our interests, I am open to dialogue. But curiosity about my family ends here. The older man raised his hands in mock surrender. Understood completely. I apologize if I overstepped. Apology accepted. Now, unless you have actual business to discuss, I have somewhere else to be. Victor stood. The meeting concluded faster than either had anticipated. Give my regards to your wife. I have heard she is quite formidable in her own right. She is, but you will never need to test that observation personally. Marco left the restaurant and returned to his vehicle, where Dominic waited with the engine running. The tension that had coiled through him during the meeting began to slowly release as Manhattan streets scrolled past outside the tinted windows. How did it go? Dominic asked. As expected. Victor was fishing for weakness, testing whether the rumors carried truth. I gave him enough to satisfy curiosity without revealing anything useful. And now? Now we continue as planned. The transition moves forward, but we increase vigilance. If Victor was bold enough to schedule a meeting, others may be considering more direct approaches. Dominic nodded, his expression grim with professional understanding. I will adjust security protocols. The family should probably limit public appearances for a while. Agreed. Talk to Elena about logistics, and make sure Luca's medical team understands the situation without being told specifics. I do not want him worrying about anything beyond getting healthy. Of course. Marco stared out the window, watching the city that had been his kingdom for so long. The conversation with Victor had clarified something he had been struggling to articulate. His commitment to change was not theoretical or contingent. It was absolute. The life he wanted for his family required a different kind of power than the kind he had accumulated, and he was willing to defend that transformation against anyone who threatened it, including parts of himself that resisted change. Eleanor met him at the penthouse door, her expression questioning as she read the tension he carried despite his efforts to conceal it. How bad? She asked quietly. Not bad, but not entirely comfortable either. Victor was testing boundaries, trying to understand how serious the changes are. I made our position clear. And you think he believed you? I think he believed I would defend our family violently if necessary. Whether he believed the rest? Marco shrugged. That matters less than what we actually do. Actions will demonstrate sincerity better than any words. Eleanor nodded, accepting his assessment with the practical wisdom that made her such an essential partner. The children are in the living room. Luca had a good appointment today. The doctors are talking about reducing his medication schedule if his next results hold. He wanted to wait up to tell you himself. Marco felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. Whatever challenges awaited in boardrooms and back channels, this was what mattered. Coming home to children who wanted to share their victories, to a wife who understood him better than he understood himself, to a family that was slowly teaching him what he had built his empire to protect. Then let us not keep him waiting. Spring arrived like a promise finally kept. The city shook off winter grey, Parks erupting in green and blossom, sidewalks filling with people who had forgotten what warmth felt like. The Vitali penthouse opened its windows for the first time in months, trading recycled air for breezes that carried the particular magic of New York in renewal. Luca turned 9 in April, his birthday celebrated with a party that brought together the small, carefully curated circle of people who had become important to their family. There were Eleanor's parents, cautiously welcomed into the household despite initial reservations. There were a few colleagues from Marco's legitimate business ventures, men and women who knew nothing of his complicated history. There were the nurses and doctors who had guided Luca's treatment, now invited as friends rather than medical professionals. And there were the children themselves, Sophia organizing games with the intensity of a general commanding troops, Marcus distributing party favors with more enthusiasm than precision, and Luca at the center of it all, glowing with health and happiness that still sometimes felt miraculous. "He looks good," remarked Dr. Santana, Luca's primary oncologist, as she stood beside Elena watching the children play. "Better than good. Some days I forget how close we came to losing him." Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on her son. "All 3 of them," she corrected mentally, the adoption now legally complete. The experimental treatment worked beyond anything we hoped. The treatment helped, certainly, but I have seen patients with better odds who did not make it. What saves children like Luca is not just medicine, it is having something to fight for. That boy has a family that refused to let him give up. Never underestimate how much that matters. Later that evening, after guests had departed and children had been negotiated, into bed, Marco and Eleanor stood together on the terrace watching the city lights spread beneath them like a second sky. "1 year ago, I did not know Luca existed," Marco said quietly. "I was running an empire built on control and violence, convinced that power was the only thing that mattered. Now, Eleanor prompted when he trailed off. "Now I understand that I was building all of that for the wrong reasons. I thought I was protecting our family, but I was really just protecting myself from the fear of losing something I loved. It took almost losing Luca to understand the difference." Elena leaned against his shoulder. "You are not the only one who learned something. When I started visiting that hospital, I thought I was just helping a sick child. I did not realize I was also healing something in myself, some wound I did not even know I carried." "What wound?" She considered the question before answering. "The fear that our life was just surfaces. Beautiful surfaces. Comfortable surfaces, but surfaces nonetheless. Finding Luca, watching you become his father, seeing our children grow into siblings, it proved that depth was possible, that we could be more than what our circumstances suggested." They stood in comfortable silence as the city hummed below them, 2 people who had built a life together and were still discovering what that life could become. "I have something to tell you," Marco said finally. Elena stiffened slightly, the instinctive response of someone whose husband's revelations had historically carried weight. "Good news or bad?" "Good. At least I hope you will think so." He turned to face her fully. "The transition is complete. As of this week, every operation that ever gave you concern has been transferred, sold, or terminated. The organization I lead now is entirely legitimate. Real estate, construction, import-export, the kinds of businesses that can withstand any scrutiny." Elena's eyes widened. "Marco, that was supposed to take years. How did you accelerate it so quickly?" "I stopped being cautious. The meeting with Victor clarified something. Half measures invite challenge, but absolute commitment demands respect. When I announced the full transition, most associates accepted it because they understood I was not asking permission. The few who objected," he shrugged, "they found opportunities elsewhere. The point is that it is done. Our children will never inherit what I inherited. They will inherit something clean." Eleanor reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines that worry and responsibility had carved over the years. "I never asked you to do this. You did not have to. You showed me what mattered by taking care of a boy you did not know, by bringing him into our family without calculating the cost. That was worth more than asking. I love you, Marco. I have loved you since the night we met, through every complication and compromise. But I think I love the man you are becoming, even more." He pulled her close, breathing in the jasmine scent that had welcomed him home for 7 years. "I am still learning what kind of man that is, but I have excellent teachers." The night softened around them, city sounds fading to distant music, stars invisible behind the glow of civilization, but present nonetheless. Somewhere in the penthouse behind them, 3 children slept in rooms they called their own, dreaming dreams they had earned through courage and hope and the stubborn refusal to surrender. Marco thought about the title he had worn for so long: boss, leader, the man others feared and followed. Those names still applied, but they meant something different now. He was boss of a legitimate business empire, leader of a family that had survived impossible odds, someone feared only by those who threatened what he loved. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The next morning brought pancakes in the kitchen, 4 generations gathered around a table that expanded to hold them all. Elena's mother told stories about her own childhood, cultural traditions passed down through years that stretched back to countries some of them had never seen. Marcus demonstrated his latest dinosaur battles, while Sophia rolled her eyes with the patient exasperation of an older sister. And Luca watched it all with eyes that still sometimes carried wonder, as if he could not quite believe this reality was truly his. "What are you thinking about?" Marco asked his son during a quiet moment between courses. Luca considered the question seriously, the way he considered most things. "I am thinking about how weird life is. A year ago I was alone in a hospital, watching my mum get sicker and thinking I would probably face the same thing. Now I have a dad and a mom and a brother and a sister and grandparents and a home. It does not make sense that so much could change so fast. Does it bother you that it does not make sense?" "No." Luca smiled, the expression carrying a maturity that illness had forced upon him too soon. "My mum used to say that the best things in life do not need to make sense. They just need to be real. And this is definitely real." Marco ruffled his son's hair, feeling the soft growth that had returned as treatment succeeded. "Yes, this is definitely real." The family finished breakfast and scattered into the rhythms of their day, children to tutors and play dates, Elena to meetings for the charitable foundations she had expanded. In honor of Luca's recovery, Marco to the offices of the legitimate empire he now commanded. But beneath those separate activities ran a common thread, a connection that distance could not sever. They were a family, complicated and imperfect and stronger because of both. And somewhere Marco liked to imagine Gabriella was watching, not as a ghost or a spirit, nothing supernatural, but as a memory that lived in the son she had raised and the future that son would inherit. She had loved Marco, enough to protect Luca from his darkness. Now that darkness had transformed into light, her sacrifice had been honored in ways she could never have predicted. That evening, Marco found Luca standing at his bedroom window, watching the sunset paint Manhattan in shades of gold and rose. "Beautiful, is it not?" Marco asked, joining him. "Yeah." Luca did not look away from the view. "My mum would have loved this. She always said sunsets were proof that every day got a chance at a beautiful ending. No matter how hard the hours before had been, she was right." "I know." Luca finally turned to face his father, his expression carrying something between grief and gratitude. "I miss her every day. I probably always will. But I am also happy, and I think that is okay. I think she would want me to be happy. More than anything." They stood together in the fading light, father and son bound by loss and found through love, watching as another day ended in beauty they had earned through hope. If you have watched this far, it is because you liked this story. Leave a comment saying, "I have watched this far," so I can get to know you and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Do not forget to leave your like on this video. It helps more people find these stories. And if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please share it with someone who needs to hear that families can be found in the most unexpected places, that second chances are real, and that love is always stronger than doubt. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story. I will see you in the next video, where another journey of hope and healing awaits. Until then, take care of yourselves and the people you love. They are what matter most.